Hello, welcome to, I don't know what. I've been reading the comments and I don't even want to say the name because apparently it offends so many people. They don't want to even say, I listened to a great podcast. Cars, they won't say it.
No.
They won't say it.
No, they're mad.
Yep.
So what do we do?
Well, see, that's the thing, and I've expressed it to you guys. I'm still wondering if it really is a loud minority of people or if it really is like a thing. Either way, I think, unfortunately, we do have to seriously consider a name change.
Well, you said people in person.
Yeah, people in person go, that's awesome.
Because people are more polite in person with the anonymity, and that was a hard one. I didn't even get it right. Of the internet, anonymity of the internet.
I get what you're saying.
They're not nice about it at all. So, yeah, car cucks won't work.
No.
Torque and Tits was something I wanted to do with April, but she didn't want that name
Bottom
for her
end,
YouTube
probably
channel.
not.
Bottom Gear was something that somebody's already done.
Real thing.
Bottom end.
Like a bunch of gay guys doing Top
That
Gear.
also would go poorly.
Yeah.
So, we need a name for this podcast, but we do like the format. Hopefully, you all are enjoying the format. That seems to be a positive feedback thing, which if you do like this, whatever we're going to call it, and want to, contribute to the name, feel free to join our Patreon, which is Patreon/ I won't even say it, but it's a link below.
For now, it's Patreon/Clarkson.
Yeah.
But today we're talking about the history of Top Gear, which is huge, massive. It was the biggest show on television at one point. It's what this set is styled after, the old Top Gear set. But basically, the whole genre of the way that we review cars on YouTube, basically every single big car YouTube channel is molded on what Top Gear created. And so far, nobody has reinvented this yet as far as a format to do things differently. And it's a huge influence with car guys, except Rob. He never watched it.
No, I watched some of it. I mean, I watched
just
it
recently.
Not just recently. I mean, I'd say from 2010 to 2016 or so, I was watching it pretty regularly. But early and end, I really just missed.
It's, and as we'll talk about, that was kind of a great time to be watching it. They were high budget by then and obviously a lot of influence. So,
right. I was into it probably right out of high school, I think. Yeah, because it was Clarkson revamped it shortly after 2000, 2001, something like that. And it took me a few years to actually catch on and watching it bootleg on the internet like a lot of people did before. Or you get the BBC iPlayer and then do the VPN to move it to England so you don't have to pay. It was a thing to have to watch it back in the day.
Don't even know what that is.
For sure. Yeah.
It was the same thing for me. I mean, I probably caught on like 2008 maybe. But it was by then they had kind of a catalog, which was great. But it just didn't make its way over here. And there's various reasons for that, as we'll discuss.
Yes. Well, the BBC is weird.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's a government-controlled entity.
People pay taxes to have television in the UK.
You can have your TV rights taken away.
Yeah. Yes.
What?
There's messages of people who haven't paid, and it's like, I'm sorry, your TV license doesn't work.
That's it. You're just off the air.
Right.
Wow.
So BBC is like PBS, which is weird. And then they had the biggest show in the world for a moment until, a punching of the face, which I'm sure there's a lot more into it than I remember.
Is that over a sandwich, I think?
Yes, over a sandwich. Yes.
Yeah, we'll let him explain that. But
well, what's new? Obviously, we've had biblical flooding today in Kansas. I was fighting the fight at the house and won the battle as far as the sump pump acting up and the gutters being clogged and the window wells filling up. But then cars were swept off the road. We haven't seen this probably since the late 90s in Wichita.
It was wild. They were telling people not to drive.
But the hangar flooded. Yeah. Where all my cars were before. If this were a year ago, all my cars would be underwater right now. It's
not good.
I'm very lucky that I've moved over.
Hugely lucky.
Yes.
For sure. What's new with me is I decided to wear pants today.
That was great.
Because I also read the comments. Of course, this is shot in advance, so you guys won't see it. But that was the last episode that was the Infinity episode of those shorts, and I might burn them because
boy, it didn't go well for you.
They're just so big. I feel like so that when you do kind of man spread a little bit, we get quite a view.
I think it's just the angle because they're pretty tight shorts.
Well, I mean,
you guys only see me sitting, so it's like it's just one of those things. But either way, a couple of weeks of wearing them on the show, and I'm never wearing them again.
Yeah, you're done.
Well, we appreciate the pants, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
I'm aiming for Hawaiian shirt hat guy.
Yeah, but you're
nailing it.
You're going
today.
for it.
Which actually, oddly enough, Stearman shirt. It's where your hangar is.
And I heard that your great deal on your Ford pickup truck
Yes.
was not the amazing deal that you thought.
It is. Well, we don't know yet. We'll find out when I register it. But I had it in for some work, and the guys working on it decided to run a Carfax just for fun, and it shows that it was salvaged out of Michigan recently, which makes zero sense because the title is from 2009. It's a one-owner truck. The lady has had it the whole time. It shows
Sure
her
she
doing
did.
work all the way.
Sure she
There,
did.
There it is.
Is that
I
the
do love
actual
it.
truck?
I
Yeah.
do love it.
The sweet little
My
old lady.
farm
I
truck.
only want $1,800 for it.
No. So I did message her, and she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I've owned this. I've never. And then came back and said, well, I do remember getting into a small fender bender in 2007.
In Michigan?
No, here. She's like, so, and I said, well, was your insurance company out of Michigan? Why would it show Michigan salvaged? And she's like, no, my insurance company's always been in Missouri. So nobody has any idea why it's showing a salvage certificate. And it says not reported salvage certificate. So I don't know what that means.
It's old F-150 for $2,000. You can't complain at all. It
Yeah.
runs and drives down the road.
Well, ask how much I just put into it.
What'd you do?
$1,137.
Oh,
Nice.
So now I'm up to $3,000, and I'm still not done. But I mean, it was all just normal stuff, just stuff that needed to be done: fan clutch, seals, oil change,
Hey,
headlights, little things here and there. But I mean, I still have to do a radio because the radio sucks. But I mean, it drives really awesome. It drives so good. It's just that was a kick in the balls getting that salvage thing popping up. I'm like, what? I got scammed. In a sense,
you got duped by a septuagenarian.
what a hootie? What?
I know. I texted that to you, and you're like, I had to look that up.
Why are you?
zooming in on the rust.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a dual fuel tank. Yes, one of them works.
Jake's very excited about the dual
Well,
tanks.
but like I was gonna say is, even if it is salvaged and all this stuff, it's still a truck for, let's call it $3,000. And around here, you end up needing a truck sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I still have my Christmas tree.
And so it's a nice thing to have a usable truck.
I still have my Christmas tree.
What do you mean?
I've actually incorporated it into the yard so people don't really know that it's now brown. But so every year we get a
You
real
just
tree.
hucked yours into the yard?
Well, that's a huck. I actually dug it into the ground
Oh my
to
God.
make it look like, but then it turned brown. So now I can't really. It's starting to turn some heads. So I think the HOA might have sent a letter, but
They have drop-off areas for these things.
well, they did, but I didn't have a truck, so I couldn't drop it off in the time. And then
Gotcha.
I haven't bought a truck till now, so now I have to find a place to put it. I don't know what to do with it. So
That's hilarious.
not great.
What's new with you, Tyler? You're
Yeah.
getting ready for the wedding. It is happening this week.
It's
It is.
so I think 1 or 2 more days of this looking normal before it gets completely transformed into a ballroom. Basically, this whole garage for the reception. So there'll be chandeliers, there'll be drapes, there'll be all this stuff. Mercifully not flooded. If we were
Yeah.
having it
Oh
at the
my
hangar,
gosh.
this would be the ultimate disaster.
Terrible.
That
So
would have been horrible.
It's this flooding is nuts. So we were going to have people staying at the hangar. They were coming for the wedding, and now we have to scramble to get them hotels. And my dad's one of his best friends, Dwayne Pointer. He was driving his Denali back to his house and got swept off near Douglas and Webb, which is like a normal east side street.
That's a very well drained area.
Carried away in his Denali and had to get a water rescue from his roof in the middle of town.
Wow.
This doesn't happen. So
And I saw so many washed up cars on the way here.
Yep. And we lost a Prius.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I saw
Yeah,
that. It was
we
in my
lost
group.
a Prius.
There's been a couple of Priuses I saw. Not mine.
Yeah,
Guys,
Just safe.
But I had, so they were just, up to the little top.
Oh,
it was
not
buried.
good.
Right. So it's been a day.
Yes.
I also have a bit of allergies. The hay fever hits me about 3 times a year, and this is one of the times where it hits. So if I'm a little woozy from the allergy medicine and sound a little weird, that's why. But
Makes
I am
sense.
very looking forward to this topic, though, of the history of Top Gear, because I think a lot of people, at least in the U.S., came to Top Gear later. Maybe not quite as late as Rob, but still later, when it was the biggest show in the world. But obviously, it was around. What, all the way back to the 1970s?
Yeah, it
Is that-
debuted April 22nd, 1977.
Wow.
And just like the Corvette, I'm excited to learn about this because I knew nothing about Corvettes until he was done, and I've honestly learned a lot.
Well, I hope I'm as as entertaining on that, because
Probably
this was
won't be.
a lot of this stuff was new for me, honestly, looking into this, because I watched and enjoyed the program, but it's like you never really looked into how it came to be the way that it is, and the numbers behind the viewership, and the way the BBC looked at it, and all this stuff. But yes, starting it, if I've got Jake, I sent Jake some pictures here. But yeah, April 22nd, 1977 was the very first Top Gear. It's a very small photo. I'm sorry, but as you can imagine, a that was what it looked like.
Did it have a disco soundtrack, or was it always the Allman Brothers?
It actually did. They pretty much did always use the Allman Brothers as an intro, and they used an Elton John song as an outro.
Wow.
A lot of the time.
Okay.
So that obviously it was the original version of that, not the remixed cool version that they later on used. But it was just a 9-episode thing. It wasn't even nationwide in Britain. It was like they kind of just showed it regionally. Did well, so they got greenlit for a full series after that. Originally, it was hosted by a lady named Angela Rippon and Tom Coyne. Now, of course, to us, that's Angela. That's probably her in her prime. To us, this is kind of one of those weird things you had to learn about, because I'm sure maybe if you were alive in Britain during this time, you would have been like, oh yeah, the Tom Coyne years. But to us, there's a lot of British celebrity going on in here that you don't know as much.
An ascot.
Yeah.
Is what in the photo that we see, there's an ascot and there's some big collars from the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, so not long after that, this is where it's interesting, old Top Gear versus new Top Gear. Old Top Gear had a lot of hosts, and I'm literally not going to touch on hardly any of them. But they got joined later on of their actual, once they got picked up by a guy named Noel Edmonds, and he was a journalist, kind of outspoken. He was a cool guy. He had a GT40, and he had some quote about how he was on one of the parkways. The fastest he'd ever been was in his GT40. He went 186 naked.
Like a real one?
What?
Yeah, I mean, presumably, because it was the 70s.
There wouldn't have been too many replicas back then.
No.
So it wouldn't have...
More common.
So
Yeah.
So this guy was cool, and he was, as we all know, I mean, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you've seen Top Gear, so I don't want to jump ahead here, but he was kind of the Clarkson of his era, because he was more outspoken. When these programs came out, it was like an old episode of Motor Week. It was just, it's a car magazine, but on TV. It was a very straightforward, factual review of cars, and occasionally they'd do hey, here's how to recover your car from a spin, kind of. That would be like the wildest thing they would show. But this guy kind of came in there and brought some of that heat journalism and would actually say, you know what, this car isn't that great every once in a while, which was...
It's very easy to do in the 1970s, especially with British cars.
They were all bad.
Yeah.
Right. He talked crap on a specific Fiat that we never got over here. And it was I've watched the clip. It's like not that harsh. But he says something, he's like, oh, I just don't like the front end. I don't know how they're going to sell any of these. They're ugly, and it looks like it's wearing school glasses made, government-issued school glasses. It's like, it's such a British insult. And Fiat, threatened to sue over it. They were like, you're killing our sales. I can't believe somebody would say that. So a host spouting off in Top Gear was not a thing that was recent. They were getting into kind of some trouble back in the day. But like I said, they were going through hosts. The lady left. What her name is? Angela Rippon.
It didn't matter.
Angela Rippon.
Girl,
Angela Rippon.
The one in her prime.
They traded beauty for brains.
Oh gosh. There's my quote. Yes, and a guy named William Woolard came on, and he kind of became the main dude. They had mixed success on BBC. It was middle of the road. It proved that people would watch a car program, but this isn't a moneymaker for them. They're just like, interesting enough. Folks seem to watch it. They had some production changes. Eventually, they brought on a guy who's one of the more famous producers of it, named John Bentley. And he discovered Jeremy Clarkson not from anything else. He was at an unveiling of the 1986 Citroen AX, which I tried to include a photo of it for Jake, but it is not an impressive car. It looks like a Ford Fiat Festiva.
And there's a young Jeremy
And there's
Clarkson.
a young
Look at
Jeremy
that.
Clarkson.
Those look like your shorts.
I know, that's basically what they look like.
Yes, so Jeremy in his afro years and his very interesting outfits and things. But
Yes. So in 1980, there's the Citroen AX.
Oof, that is
imagine
ugly.
being at
hideous.
that unveiling. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
but like I
the
said-
one clap.
Yeah, I'd be like, wow, guys,
Yeah.
you did it. So Jeremy Clarkson was just a journalist. He wasn't. He had no on-screen time, no screen credits, but he just got to talking with John Bentley, and he made such an impression that he was like, I like this guy, and they kind of stayed in touch, more or less. And Jake is now zoomed in on the photo. It's a pretty good picture of him, honestly.
I thought he was going for the shorts.
I don't know
Right.
if he's holding a camera or what.
Clarkson Young's not a bad-looking dude.
no.
Yeah.
And so anyway, like I said, he just formed a relationship. This is 1986. Nothing happens. They go through some hosts, and I'm not kidding. They go through like 9 different hosts. It's crazy. But it's like they have 3 or 4 at a time, because they have a couple of people in studio, not studio, but main anchors, you could call them, and then some guys doing segments, and the segments is all you'd see of them. So I didn't want to talk about this era for too long. But in 1988, John Bentley calls Clarkson and says, do you want a job? Do a segment on Top Gear. So Jeremy Clarkson gets to do his first segment in 1988 on a Rolls-Royce tuning firm. This is a screenshot from that thing. It was like a Rolls-Royce tuning firm named Hooper. I'd never heard of it. I didn't really look too much into it. But the important part was this was Clarkson's first time on Top Gear and pretty much on the air.
He's dressed very smart,
Yeah.
very professional.
It looks like you're going to drive a Rolls-Royce.
Yeah.
Fast forward some time because we don't need to talk about old Top Gear too much, but he was such a hit on the show from the instant he got on there that by 1990 he was a household name in Britain. Like he was a full-on celebrity as kind of we know him, and it was very obvious they went from, with the addition of just him, and they attribute it solely to him, they were getting about 100,000 views an episode to 2 million.
Wow.
Weekly. So they loved it. It stopped being Top Gear. It started being the Jeremy Clarkson show.
Yeah. Well, I knew in the mid 90s, I think his first exotic car that he talked about buying on the show was like the F355. So he's getting paid enough to buy a Ferrari.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think he spec'd it out, and it wasn't a.
They showed it red. Yeah.
I think it was a joke where he's talking about how he's going to do something in a very unusual color and do a very unusual spec, and then he decided, no, it's my first Ferrari. I'm getting it in red.
Yeah.
And so shares the same taste as you as far as Ferraris, Rob.
So he has
And
good
me
taste.
too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm a Rosso Corso over tan guy
Me
myself.
too.
So yeah, 1991, the old host William Woolard officially is just like, all right, I'm stepping down. Nothing bad. He just stepped down. Clarkson is now the main guy and now has a lot of say in how the show goes, everything like that. This is around the time when even other publications were calling things the Clarkson effect, and it's not as positive as you might think. It's because Clarkson was known for spouting off about things or being so honest about things, is manufacturers were actually reporting sales changes after he did or did not like something. Like they would straight up blame him. Oh, our car didn't sell because Jeremy Clarkson did a poor review on it. And I mean, it wasn't just like a thing that they would say. There were a lot of threatened suits and stuff that they were like, you affected our sales. I mean, this is early days. This is pre-internet. So something he said that got seen by millions of viewers, I mean, in a very small area, that I could see that would affect sales. So this is when the Clarkson effect was dubbed. This is him probably making a snide remark about a BMW.
Oh, guaranteed. Is that a 5 or a 7?
5 Series.
The 5.
Yeah. E39. Yeah.
Yep. So, like I said, blah, blah, blah. He's the main guy. He's becoming a celebrity. He's having enough impact that he's affecting sales. By 1994, he does his own kind of special. So we can't really call them specials yet because it's basically like he's selling like a VHS for Christmas time, but it is a special. And he's doing stuff that's called Motor World. I think I gave Jake a picture of this. See, Jeremy Clarkson Motor World is dressed like Carmen Sandiego for some reason.
Look at that.
But the theme of this is interesting. It's where he literally travels from country to country, looking at various car cultures, doing crazy things in those regions. And it really became the inspiration for a lot of the traveling and stuff that they would do on the new Top Gear. And we'll get to the specials and stuff like that. But they actually did that whole Hilux in the snow thing on Motor World first. And so it was like, hey, this is pretty interesting. And obviously they went back and later used that. But these were, like I said, VHSs that they'd sell separately at the store, and you'd watch a highly produced home video. Now, for you kids, that used to be a thing. You used to go to the store and there was stuff that they wouldn't show on TV, not because it was bad, but it was stuff like this that was so niche that you had to go get a tape of it.
Well, it was another way to make money.
Also that too.
Yeah, you could do live events, or you could sell VHSs, and you'd go to the rental store and rent it, or you'd go and buy it off the shelf too.
Right.
Oh, the TV spinoff of Stargate or something like that. They were all doing it. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it was a different time, but it was a good time, for that. Speaking of 1996 comes along, Top Gear, the presenters are still coming and going. Clarkson's still gaining influence. But as his influence grew, his reviews started to be even more controversial, and he started to show more and more supercar stuff, which that's what he wanted to do. Can you blame the guy?
Not at all.
He wanted to be, he pretty much was like, you guys should just let me do whatever I want because whatever I want works, is essentially his ethos on the matter.
Cocky.
Yeah.
Cocky.
Cocky for a reason, though.
Oh, so cocky.
He then started making. I know we already had the world traveling one. He started making his own videos that were not associated with Top Gear. Just called. They had different specials. His first one was called like Jeremy Clarkson Unleashed,
Like your home videos.
Wow.
not
Elliot Alvis Unleashed.
Yes. Yeah.
I can see that.
Unfortunately, that's leaked to the internet once. If you guys
Uh-oh.
Google it, it's
Now it's going to start trending.
not something I would want to watch again.
no. You did watch it the first time though.
I was impressed with your stamina, but I'm not watching it again.
I didn't know it existed, and
I'm making
It
this
doesn't
all up.
exist.
I'm making it up.
Sorry, guys. But yeah, so this was his first thing because it was him and his those intense eyes he's making. This was the first thing where he had a full control over because the other one was BBC sponsored. This was I'm gonna make as Jeremy, I'm gonna make something, and he pretty much makes it exactly like Top Gear. It's cars just shooting it out, driving on tracks, going as fast as possible, sliding around. It's Top Gear.
It's an epic YouTube video.
Yes.
What we would see today.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Recently, we saw the ZR1 launch and everybody
Yes.
doing a video
Yep.
out on a track, shooting it out. That's what these DVDs were. Like all the hottest cars of the day, duking it out
Right.
with him hosting it.
And this is the only way you could see it because there wasn't YouTube and you couldn't look anything up. If you wanted to see Vipers and it was a cool way to do it. And I've firmly,
You're firm?
I fondly remember.
That was Elliot Alvis Unleashed.
There you go. See, that's why you had my firm on the mind. Anyway, I remember watching videos like this. But anyway, back to the deal. Now Top Gear, this is the late 90s, 98, 90s, whatever. Now they're seeing 7 million viewers a week. So we're up from 100,000 in like what they thought was doing great to 7 million. I mean, they're a huge program.
A huge jump.
But because there were so many other hosts and because the BBC, and the current production staff was still ultimately in charge of everything, there was still a lot of, for Clarkson's taste, stale content. So he was like, yeah, I get to do some cool stuff sometimes, but then there's all these other boring things that are going on. And Clarkson was his own brand now. And so he just kind of was like, I don't know, I'm kind of done. I think this program's too stale to continue. And so he announces he's leaving Top Gear in 1999. And I mean, of course, everyone's like, well, that's our...
Well, the issue was that they thought they needed to do a lot of like service to the people as far as public safety stuff and rules of the road and the very very boring things that some, not to knock PBS too much, but the things that you would see on there where it's a little stale, and then some flashy Clarkson stuff. So it was it didn't make sense. It was a bad mix of stuff.
It was jarring to the audience because you're like, I don't want to watch rules of the road and then sweet supercars. You're like, it's similar to complaints they would do. You guys never do reviews of modern Hyundai Elantras and stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah, because that's not entertaining.
And I kind of feel like it kind of tracks with your channel in a sense when you started getting into the supercars and things, and of course you're going to do it, and then some of your base was like, well, what are you doing this for?
Oh, going back to Hoopties?
Yeah, going back because the Hoopties are kind of what built you, and that's what everybody kind of got on board with.
Thank goodness I could go back to Hoopties, because when I got annihilated financially for many different reasons, like I could crawl back to Hoopties and still do okay. But there's definitely a peak Hoovies garage a couple of years ago where I was spending some money. As I just got a Bayron, but that's a lease with a monthly payment. But there's no supercar of the month going on with me for a long time, probably, or ever. But so Clarkson, I didn't know this. He left.
Yeah, he left. He didn't get fired. He was like, I'm gonna go do my own thing. This show's not gonna do well. Like, it's on its way out. Like, he just kind of called it. And that's easy to say when you're bringing the numbers. That's almost kind of not fair. You're like, this show is gonna fail. I'm leaving. And then they're like, their numbers flounder.
Oh yeah, and they did.
So they still have, like I said, like 6 hosts or regular appearances, you could call them. And this is what I didn't know, some of this, is that, so there's this massive power vacuum, that's going on. They're like, who's our main guy now? So they hire, and this is old Top Gear, they hire James May. They bring him in. I didn't know he was ever on old Top Gear. And apparently he had originally auditioned for the show in 1992. So a long time ago. I mean, maybe it's 6 years, but...
Right. Because he wasn't there for the first season of the revamp.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's so interesting. I didn't know this. But the reason they rejected him, because he, Clarkson was already on the program and stuff by this point. They rejected him because he was too similar to Clarkson, and that could not be like as with the Top Gear that we all know and love. that is a hilarious statement to call him too similar.
Well, April's talked about this with TV shows and things where they're hiring girls and stuff, and they can't get girls that look similar. So if they have a somewhat similar look, and he's a tall, skinny dude with moppy head and blue eyes, and then there's two of them, people get confused, especially with old grainy televisions. So that was definitely a thing back in the day, and still is somewhat. Where April said she missed on a few roles because she looked too much like some A-list celebrity or whatever.
I mean, I get it. You don't want like three of the same looking guy on the screen at the same time. It's kind of confusing. But he didn't stay on the show for very long. I don't have notes on exactly how long, but he got kicked off the show for a lady named Kate Humble. And the reason they picked her, which is a hilarious reason, is because she specifically did not know much about the world of cars. So they kind of brought her in as the, look, we'll show her stuff kind of segment, which... gosh, that's not, as you can tell, it didn't really work out.
No.
But I thought that was hilarious that Top Gear was like, no, James May, no. We need to bring in a girl who has no idea anything about cars, and that's why we like her. Kind of a bizarre thing.
So they torpedoed the show.
Totally tanked it. Views are now fewer than 2 million per week, thing. They got a slight second wind when... as you know, there were shoot-offs of this, which we'll kind of talk about. But Tiff Needell, who was later on the host of Fifth Gear, was originally on Top Gear. Yes, here. And he started to do more Clarkson-y things, not necessarily punchy reviews, but he started to do more slidey supercar stuff. Numbers picked up a little bit, and they let him start doing more and more of that stuff. But it wasn't enough to save the show. By August 2001, they just canned it. I mean, it was just it's hard to even call it a second wind. It was like a whip, slight uptick, nothing compared to what it was. Obviously, then Tiff, Vicky, and whatever the other guy, Adrian, went on to make Fifth Gear because a new television channel had launched called Channel 5. I don't understand how the British TV works. Apparently, they only have like 6 channels, or at least they did back then. And so this new channel wanted to have a motoring program. So these guys were like, well, we don't have one anymore. We'll go off over there.
Okay.
So, September 2001, some bad stuff happened in America. But during that time, Clarkson actually rejoins Top Gear, but not as a television show host because there isn't a show anymore. But I forgot to mention they did launch a magazine that was under the same brand as the show. And it was a huge magazine. It was a very successful publication. Clarkson is a journalist, so it's a good fit. And he's just as snarky on paper. But yeah, he rejoined Top Gear as a full-time contributor. So now he's just writing columns for him. And, obviously those are the most impressive columns. They put him on the covers and say, here's what Clarkson thinks about this. He's still doing car reviews. It's just, you could sell magazines back then. Yeah. These were selling hundreds of thousands of copies. So still doing well for them. Ad space in magazines like this was great. But during that time is when he starts talking to a guy named Andy Willman, who, if you've watched Top Gear, is pretty much the first guy's name you see on the end of every episode. He is the main producer. He is the head honcho behind what would become revamped Top Gear. Before that, BBC still had the rights to Top Gear, but they had BBC kind of said, well, we can make 2 programs, and Clarkson pitched a program called Carmageddon, and it really was just basically one of his specials, but on TV. They basically were going to do it to make sense episodically because they could spend some big budget on the once a year home video stuff. But if they were going to do it repeatedly and have it week after week, they were like, how do we replicate this? Which is how they kind of came up with originally for Carmageddon, they scaled down. We need to do this in one location, have it, kind of repeatable things, like the airport and stuff like that. That's where they came up with that. For the Carmageddon, and this is another one that you'll love, this really is Top Gear in the formula we know it and we love. They even had a Stig, but they didn't call him the Stig. They called him the Gimp.
Oh,
whale.
And he was in all black.
Better than the Simp.
Yeah,
Yes.
clearly.
But I didn't know that they really did have. They were ready. I mean, this was Top Gear. They just were like, we have this guy called the Gimp, and he's going to do all the racing, driving, and stuff like that. And that was going to be a real thing. But the problem that Top Gear and the BBC had was they were like,
hold on, Rob, why are you on your phone?
Marketplace.
I'm actually trying to Google what GIMP means in British. I wanted to know exactly what that means.
Yes. So not,
I think it
not
means
somebody
what you
that's
think it
gimpy.
means.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't think so, but I mean...
No, they said it was, in my research, it was modeled after from, what's it called? Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
Like, literally, the guy in the gimp suit. So, I think it really was like they were trying to be cheeky,
Okay.
as the British would call it.
Yeah, mine said a dual-purpose machine gun, so that's not it.
Probably not that.
But yes,
So anyway, ultimately, Top Gear or BBC decided they're like, well, we can't have 2 car television programs. I mean, that one's it's gonna obviously divide audiences, and it doesn't make sense in their limited time of programming. They're like, oh, just whatever, do your show, but call it Top Gear. Essentially, is what that came up with. So now we have Top Gear, that the beginnings of what Top Gear 12 as we know it in 2002. Obviously, he needs another host, so they find Hammond, who also had originally auditioned for old Top Gear in 2000, but didn't make it for some reason.
Yeah, so he was like a radio host, like
He was, and he had some other bit parts in other BBC programs. So he was a known presenter, and he was known for his energetic, excited, he's very well-known presenter. He still does non-car related stuff. I mean, he's a great guy. So they had him, and then they had this other guy named Jason Daw. And to me, he just kind of looks like a chunky, and his whole thing was he's a used car salesman. So he was the...
Right. So I watched some of the episodes
Yeah.
with him, and it was jarring for them to go talk about the used car market. And then once again, it seemed like a public service thing.
Yeah. So
It didn't work.
it's funny though, because originally Clarkson did want May on the original get-go. Hey, I want it to be me, Hammond, and May. James May said, no, I did not know this. I thought he was a later addition. He said, this is what you find when you're researching stuff. And his reason he declined it is because he didn't want to be on a show that would fail. And the reason he wasn't unsure of the formula, but because after he got kicked off of old Top Gear, he went on to do 2 other programs that both got instantly canceled, didn't last long at all. So he was just on a losing streak of getting a program and either the program shutting down or him getting kicked off it. So he heard this formula and he's like, I've been there, done that. I don't want the disappointment of being a part of another show's failure. So
can't blame him.
very interesting. I did not know that. Obviously, this is different than the way they used to do it because now they have a studio, they have the Stig, and they have an area. So before they would kind of just cut from segment to segment, more or less. You had main hosts who would be in more things, but this now they kind of had a home base to go back to. We all know that now. What's interesting is the first pilot episode they ever shot, they burned 2 full episodes, couldn't use them, and had to shoot it a 3rd time. So BBC was not happy with them at first.
Why did they have to do that?
They were unusable. The I can't spit it out. The crew, they were missing shots.
Technical issues.
It was all technical issues and stuff, but they did full episodes, couldn't use them.
And there's the set
Yes.
that I have modeled all this after.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why it was the original inspiration, not only because the show was such a big deal, but we wanted to talk about that because we're kind of sitting in the only thing that's left that looks like that.
Pretty much.
Right.
Originally, the first run, when it was Jason Dahl and all those guys, they didn't have this. So this was an addition in series 2. Originally, they were just standing in the hangar, and they didn't have the live audience that they were known for either. So if you ever watch a series 1 segment, it's it's unbelievable how far they came. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so there is the set. Let's see here. October, on their first episode, they kind of came out with a banger. I mean, as far as they wanted to make it exciting and all stuff, and they knew they had to get back in the audience's good graces, because it's been absent for a while. What's new with this? It had only really been gone for a year, but still, if people are going to revamp something, they want to see it. So they had the very first episode. They did a review of the Lamborghini Mercy versus the Pagani Zonda. And they also Hammond did a segment of how fast you need to go to fool a speed camera. So these would have been very interesting things to the British public at the time. Be like, wow.
There's some point where I was able to go back and watch every single episode wherever they were on the internet, to where I was able to I'm in college, and there's a whole day or days or weeks with nothing to do. So back when I had time to do these kind of things, I binged Top Gear. And it was very epic for sure, but it was jarring, the used car segment of it. It just that was the part where I didn't get. Even when I was a used car salesman,
did it seem like it just didn't flow with the show, because I never saw that part of it. So
so the first episode, I don't have viewership numbers. I just have it premiered at 31st out of 150 programs. So it's not tanking, but it's not what it was. And, it just kind of went on to about a lukewarm reception for most of the first series. Towards the end of the series, they started to kind of hit its stride. They added the cool wall. and things like that kind of people started to really enjoy and have feedback. I remember even thinking this was interesting, even if it's dated. It's still cool to go back and watch.
I love that.
So
basically, the cool wall was where they could have debates and discussions on what car was cool, and then they could divide it in 3 different sections of like cool Sub-Zero for like the most amazing cars, and then seriously uncool.
Yeah.
And they could move them around. They'd fight over it, and that's where cars would end up before they started posting lap times, which is what most people remember.
Right. Yeah, and then they had I forgot to mention, I mean, we all know the format, but it needs to be said. The other thing they did add with the studio segment was the interview process or portion with Clarkson and a star in a reasonably priced car where they would put a celebrity around their test track, and it was a hilarious segment. Even like I said, Clarkson would do a great interview, very car centric, and then they would put these celebrities behind the wheels. Nobody else was doing things like that. So end of the series, it kind of just ends like that. But they cut Jason Daw because obviously, as Tyler said, it was like, what is this?
It was weird.
Reportedly, they wanted to get rid of Hammond too. Not because he was doing anything wrong, but they were like, we got to get this, something's not working. And they couldn't tell, I don't know how they couldn't, that it was mostly just him. And they were like, we got to get rid of Hammond. And they said, we got to find somebody who's trendy to add here, which is hilarious when you know who they go back to. So Clarkson gets back in touch with May and is more of a begging, please come do the show. And apparently for the BBC, that's good enough. They were like, he was like trendy enough. It's funny because they go on to paint him as being such a, this old fuddy-duddy.
Well, that's his introduction to the show was, I think, here's James May. He's an idiot.
Yes.
And then it was why he had this old Rolls Royce and why he liked it and made him look like a total old British gentleman that just likes stupid, terrible cars.
Right. And I remember that too. It's a great segment. So this is where we're kind of talking about not specific episodes and stuff like that, but this is where now the formula is there. The 3 are together, but it's not still quite the Top Gear that we remember in its heyday. They're still kind of working it out. There's the segment that he does with his old rules and everything. It's great. He makes a good point. It's basically why, it's 10,000 pounds or whatever. And anyway.
And they still are to this day. I actually just bought one for $4,000.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How would you imagine that thing's conditioned back in 2002, though?
Right. Yeah.
So they, like I said, it's still doing okay ratings wise, but here's where it starts to do better. BBC World now starts broadcasting it in other countries. So before, this was still exclusive. It had not gotten out of the United Kingdom. It's like this great high budget show that they're still kind of only showing here. They start showing it in, Amsterdam and wherever else. It gets picked up by various BBC World affiliates, starts gaining some popularity. Now, one thing I want to pick out specifically, because this happens after that, and remember it was one of the first bits that I saw, is one of the other things that really skyrocketed them to popularity was the Toyota Hilux thing, which was around this time. It was this series.
Yes.
So
everybody talks about how much of an innovator Whistling Diesel is, testing Toyota pickup trucks.
This is where he got it from.
Here it is.
This is the one that got me involved.
Right. See, that's
I
what I'm
remember
saying.
watching this and going, I have to watch more of this show.
This was a viral video pretty much before you could have viral videos. It was like you'd heard about it and forums had posted it. This was around that same time where you're like, wow, if this segment's that good, I got to check out the rest of the show. And if you haven't seen it, please take a time to look it up. It really is impressive.
They blow up like a 20, 25-story building with this thing on top of it. It still starts. They send it out into the ocean and let it wash out to the sea, and it washes back in. It starts, it runs again, and they catch it on fire.
Drop a caravan
they
on
crash it.
Yeah.
Yes, they drop things on it, and none of these things could kill this Hilux. And it was you were rooting for the car. It was so incredible. It wasn't, Whistling Diesel will torture test and actually destroy it, but this one, it survived all of it. I think Whistling Diesel's video was similar to where finally when they dropped it out of a helicopter from however many, it pancaked the thing, but otherwise he couldn't kill it. But basically, Top Gear did it 20 years earlier.
Yep, exactly. But it was what I didn't know. So I remember it being popular because I was at that right age to think this is the coolest thing, ever. And it still is. What I didn't realize is how much Toyota ran with this. I thought that they would just be like, oh, cool, maybe saw an uptick in sales. They officially even named a new trim level of the Hilux after this segment. They just called they had a trim level called the Invincible because of this. They also started including clips from it in top, and I saw the YouTube video of it. If we could do videos, I'd show you. But even Toyota USA was using this as an example for the Tacoma over here. They were like, some guys in Britain couldn't destroy it, and they were showing, you know, all the different tests they did. I mean, it was, again, if it wasn't already viral for the program, it was Toyota was using it, you know, and further advertising these guys.
And how far Toyota has fallen since
Oh yeah,
exactly
with their 4-cylinder turbo hybrid Tacomas and their
Ugh.
recall of hundreds of thousands
the
of twin turbo
Tundras.
V6 Tundras.
Yeah. Yep. So moving along now, things are getting better. Things are going the way we think it is. Is this the Invincible trim? Yes.
Oh, wow.
Now, obviously, we don't
Okay.
get the Hilux here, so we don't get this trim of, well, anything. But it is pretty cool to know that. Imagine having a TV show be that influential. You know, that has got to be the biggest mark of an automotive program. Be like, we have a trim level named after.
Well, and Toyota had
something
to
we
do that
did.
when they saw it keep
Oh, yeah.
running. You know, they all got together and like, we have to capitalize
Yeah.
on this.
So, starting in but fast forwarding now to 2004, this is kind of when he really starts to get into his format. And this is definitely around when I started to be like, all right, I'm not going to miss, you know, well, not, it's going back because remember we said in 2008, but this is the time where you started to watch it, you know, regularly. They had the epic segments that I know I've seen multiple times, like the Aston Martin DB9 race to Nice. So this is their first thing where Clarkson is in an Aston Martin DB9. Hammond and May take the train to all the way to Nice, and the whole thing was, can the car beat, you know, this? It's car versus anything, and that was the first time they did it. It was in 2004, and if you're a fan of the show, it became a regular segment.
I've had one of those.
You did have
And I
one.
bought it from you and then sold it to the guy that you sold the other cars to.
Yes, and he made $17,000 off
Yes.
of both of us.
Right. But the timing was also excellent for them as far as the new cars that were coming out
Yes.
in the mid 2000s.
Because that's our heyday of-
I mean, they had the SLR McLaren, which they did a similar race with it, I think, with a plane, right?
They did so they did Bugatti Veyron versus them in a 172. They did the SLR versus, I think, Bullet Train, or not Bullet Train, but it was another public transportation thing, because
Yes.
part of the deal was he had to sleep in it while they got to, you know, he was trying to stay awake. I just watched that one recently.
Right.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. The cars that they had available that were coming out. I mean, yeah, what was coming out in 2005? You can
Yeah.
start getting your hands on these.
Right.
Obviously, the
You know.
products that were coming out, the Carrera GT, the Ferrari Enzo, the timing was just perfect for a car show with no limits, with Clarkson, you know, doing whatever he wants, and the fact that they were big enough that the manufacturers were loaning them
Right.
these incredible machines to do crazy stuff with it we had never seen before, but other than reading about it in magazines, we'd never seen visually anything like this before.
That is a great point. And because of the visual, and because they weren't gentle to these cars. And I think that was one of the coolest things about it. It was like, they are shredding tires, even on normal cars, you know, that they somehow made it. They were kind of like putting them in these situations that you just hadn't seen, especially without access to the internet, you know, like that content creators doing it.
Right. But yeah, they had access to the Veyrons, to the Carrera GTs, to the Enzos. But then they decided to still stick with hoopties every once in a while,
Yeah.
too,
And
which
that's-
was so great.
So around this season is also another thing. Yeah, they did the 100-pound cars for 100-pound challenge, and that was the first time they did we each buy a cheap X car and try to make it to blank. You know, that was the first time they started that segment. Was around this time period.
Which was that for kids, or like for kids' first cars?
They did one later. They did a teen cars.
Oh, that's okay.
That's the one with
But
the
this
handbrake.
This is the one where they crash tested it, and I think the Volvo speedometer was broken to where Clarkson crashed into the wall and
went
chipped
really
his yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And so they crash tested these $100
Yeah, he went
cars.
way too fast into his thing.
Now, was this when they started to like sabotage each other's cars? Were they getting into that with this?
It lightly as on this one, because it was one of the early ones. But yes, this is one of the challenges where they started
Always-
to do, you know, we were tasked with doing X to each other's cars.
But you can imagine buying a car for $100 and saying crashed into a wall at 30 miles an hour,
How
and it
big.
just like what?
yeah.
I mean, just watching it was just so unbelievable.
That was wild.
yeah.
Hey, you crashed a an Impreza for a YouTube video.
I did, yeah. So Wizard had a Honda Prelude that his daughter snuck out and joyrided and crashed, and I needed the Impreza engine out of the Subaru for my Beck Spider, for my Porsche Spider replica. So I thought, well, why not crash it? And it was a violent crash. Even a plane's crash was very violent.
It looked jarring.
It looked like that was like surprisingly hard for even you. Like you were like, you knew it was happening.
Yeah,
and it was still like.
And I did a demolition derby, and I was sore for a couple of weeks.
We went to that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Crazy.
You took some big hits in that.
Yeah.
But they were kind of knowing, the guy from TV's here doing a demolition derby, so they had it for me a little. I got second place out of I don't know, 15 cars.
You've never done it before too. That's why I was like, oh my god.
I was so happy that I actually got some money. I think I got $200 for second place in a trophy. So
that offset the production costs a little bit.
Not really, no.
Okay, so this is the time. There's an interesting little period here that I also didn't know about because it's not like they really said it. But is this you?
That's him.
Yeah, that is
mine,
you doing it. Yep.
Look at that thing.
Yeah, this whole show, my whole show on Motor Trend was on history as well. Was sort of modeled after the Top Gear Cheap Car Challenges, and basically I was buying something that was once cool that is cheap and do something fun with it. Take it to my mechanic, tell me how terrible it was, and decide if I'm going to keep it or flip it. That the ending part was a little weak. It was just to get the TV people at their minds like, oh, it's a flip show there, so they're going to sell the car at the end. That was the way to get it to be greenlit. But really, it was more like the Top Gear Cheap Car Challenges. So that's my show, was basically a rip-off of that. I think it's a little late for them to sue me for it. But I mean, so many people have taken a little segment, a type of Top Gear, and then made it their own. So I don't feel like I'm in good company, I think.
For sure.
Yeah. So this is still around. Oh, there we go.
Wizard. Look at that. And Wizard, yeah.
I didn't realize Wizard wasn't smiling for his photo, but I guess it makes sense.
That's before I had my chin fixed.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, here we go with the chin.
My God. No, you don't want to give them the idea.
I had cool sculpting done.
Why?
Because I hated these pictures where everybody was saying that, why does this skinny guy have a double chin? And there was constant comments about it. And so I had like where they put Ice Cube, and then they give you a hickey and they suck it. That kills all the fat. And basically it improved my double chin dramatically. And to where I don't get comments on it anymore.
I didn't think you'd ever say that on camera or on
I say it all the time. Yeah. I do.
Okay.
About
wow.
It, yeah.
Huh. I always thought that was private.
Thought that was off limits.
Now you guys
know.
All right, then.
No,
Okay.
the penile enlargement was private, but in this,
Okay, so this is back to the just chronologically. I didn't know this, but in 2005, Clarkson pulled his shoulder essentially while shooting the show. He was drifting around on a Holden Monero or whatever. And so for a period of time there, he couldn't drive. So it was actually an interesting thing that they had to do because Clarkson, as you recall from the earlier days and still the earlier days of the new format, was still the star of this show. So he went from appearing in like 2/3 of the segments to like 25% of them because during this time. It was a very interesting time, but they already had a bunch of pre-shot stuff, so didn't worry. It didn't matter that much. I mean, this is the time where they did the cool cheap convertible challenge with the 350Z, the TT, and the Crossfire. I'm trying to think what else they did around that time.
Well, they made fun of the Crossfire the way it looked because it was like they were like it was a dog taking a poop.
I've never been able to unsee it after you said that.
Now everybody makes fun of the way the Crossfire looks because of Jeremy Clarkson. But same with the Porsche Panamera that came later, where everybody's like, "Oh no, look, I can't." It's the Clarkson effect.
Well, so during this time where Hammond and May are getting more screen time is kind of when the official dynamic as we know it now really got solidified, where it stopped being Clarkson and two friends and started being more about how the three guys are interacting with whatever they were doing. So it really was, you could always, before this time period, there was definitely a I'm in charge and these two guys are also here dynamic. But then it started to be really solidified as we three are experiencing this. Their relationship, one of the things they're most famous for, which we can really go on about, is their real on-screen dynamic was genuine. It was real, and that's what they've kept trying to recreate. But you can't capture fire like that. It really was, a lightning in the bottle type of situation.
They didn't mind disagreeing with each other and actively disliking each other as far as what annoyed them and things. So they were willing to just completely just put the other guy down in his place. And
when I watched it, that was one of the things that kind of drew me to it because it didn't seem scripted. It was like, wow, these guys are really mad at each other. Like they're annoyed, like visibly annoyed. And it was like, for me, I'm always one of those people that things that I watch, if I can tell that it's kind of scripted or fake, you don't get lost in it. But when you can tell it's real and you really like, wow, okay, there's some tension here. You really you're glued to your seat. You're like, this is really good television. And they did such a good job with the production and just everything, the way they shot it and just everything about it in the episodes in all the episodes that I've seen. It's just a cut above anything I've ever watched and still to this day have seen. It's just amazing.
It is. And like I said, this is just to highlight a couple more things that happened during this same season. They did the Isle of Man shootout, which I think was the Aston Martin Vantage and the M6.
Wow.
I believe. That was a great segment because it was just beautiful.
Yes.
They did the life-size RC cars, which again, to pull that off was incredible, especially at the time. It's not like we had access to cheap, Arduinos and stuff like that to make that a little easier. And then they did Jake pulled a picture of it earlier. They did the road trip or the challenge where they had the 4GT, the Zonda. And then oddly enough, which I think these are like two hypercars, and then the 430 Spider. I know it was because it was the new Ferrari at the time, but it's like compared to a Ford GT and a Zonda, of all of the Ferraris, like 430 Spider.
And it was Clarkson's personal Ford GT,
right?
I believe, or he owned one.
Yep.
And I wonder if he tanked the values for a while because he talked about how unreliable it was, and how he was so happy to sell it after he got towed 2 or 3 times, all because of I think the British immobilizer that was on it that
was mandated.
Had a lot of problems with that with his. And obviously he was wrong because the Ford GT is about the most reliable supercar there is out there. But there was a time, I feel like, because Clarkson was like, man, this thing's a piece of junk and just dumped his. Where these were selling for half of their MSRP in 2007, 8, 9.
Yeah.
They were low hundreds and now they're a $500,000 car with low miles.
I think he did have a Clarkson effect on Ford GTs because he was very outspoken about it on the biggest automotive program. This was also the same season of the Veyron versus the plane, and that was a big success because the Veyron does win.
Right.
This was the drag race, but they did a challenge. I don't think there's a great image of it, Jake, so don't worry about it. But they basically, it was Clarkson May and Hammond took a Cessna 172, which if you're not familiar with them, they're just the smallest, most common single prop airplane. They're pretty common around here, but the challenge was, they were going to the same destination, one by plane, one by car. There were obviously stipulations to it, but it was impressive that it was a victory for automobiles everywhere that the Veyron won.
Well, and then of course Captain Slow, as his nickname became, because he was such a slow driver, got to take a Veyron to top speed.
Yes.
And for a moment was the fastest man in the world as far as production street car speeds. For a moment, and until the professional driver came and did it. So they all became their own personalities, their own little quirks where they would make fun of each of them. And Hammond was the hamster. He was small and able to fit in everything, and being slow and kind of a piddler with James May.
Right, and Hammond's thing there, he's kind of like just an always happy, almost closeted hillbilly. They always made fun of him for being a secret American.
Yes.
He loved, stuff like that.
And Clarkson's just big, bombastic, egotistical.
Right. They all leaned into their characters, and it just worked because I think that it's not too much of a character. I think they really are just like
they
that.
are. Yeah.
So you make up a good point. Another thing that's happening around this time is they're getting bigger and bigger guests. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I mean, the bigger the guests they got, the more it kind of perked up people's ears.
Tom Cruise.
I was going to say Tom Cruise
and Cameron Diaz, and it's an epic episode because that is the SS Veyron episode, I think. Because they were promoting whatever movie it was. And the Tom Cruise...
Mr. Bean. Yeah. There's Mr. Bean in the photo there.
But the Tom Cruise is the coolest lap because he really gets that thing up on two wheels across the line. I mean, it's... this is no longer, as if you had any doubts if it was a small program. Tom Cruise doesn't go on a lot of shows. This is before couch jumping era Scientology Tom Cruise. This was like...
I think it still was. I think it's still in that era, but they called that corner Gambon because of Michael Gambon, who almost flipped it in the last turn. And every once in a while, Tom Cruise was one of them where they would get the reasonable sized car on 2 wheels across the finish line. And there's the photo of it. I think a Suzuki. I think it was called the Aereo in the U.S. I'm not sure. Leana, I think in the UK is what they had for the early reasonably sized car. And Jay Leno wanted to go on it. Just every celebrity wanted to go on and test their time, and Clarkson would talk about it in the interviews. Every single one of them, even Tom Cruise, when they're looking for that time, they would lean in. They had to know.
Yeah. It was a big deal.
Did they win?
There's the other thing. They're pitting celebrities against each other. It wasn't just like, hey, you did it. It was, how did you do in comparison to Gordon Ramsay or whatever? It was like, oh, I hope and then people would always used to say, it's like, well, I certainly hope I'm faster than Judi Dench.
Well, yeah, with their big egos. I mean, these are big egos, and they don't want to lose.
And I was just watching a clip segment of celebrity, so when celebrities are interviewed and it goes off the rails where it's really offensive.
Yeah.
And of course, Clarkson was with one of them in this like top 10, and it was like what's his name, Rupert Grint or whatever, the guy in Harry Potter, the redhead kid.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And he's just, so when you were kissing Emma Watson, did you get a boner? It was something like that.
He
Like,
asked
did you get
that?
a semi? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And it's like, what? It was something totally outlandish like that.
That's awesome.
And of
Wow.
course, Clarkson's the only person who could get away with that. But
Oh, yeah.
out of context, where in this compilation was put together, it was pretty amazing.
He got away with saying a lot of stuff. He also didn't get away with saying certain things. We can touch on
Oh,
that later.
yes,
But
yes.
anyway, he was that was part of the Clarkson thing. He was regularly getting in trouble, even making just press statements. He would just say something and be like, Clarkson says blank. It was always just like he was.
Because he didn't mind talking about politics. He didn't mind talking about just
He punched
anything.
Pierce Morgan in the face.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, it's just like
I remember that.
there's stuff going on. Anyway, back to the show. Things are speeding up. Distribution is getting wider during this time. It's still like 07, 08, whatever. Interestingly enough, we didn't have BBC. It wasn't on BBC America yet, which is interesting at this time. They licensed it to Discovery Channel, which you'd think would be great, because I was watching Discovery Channel around this time. There were a lot of good shows on there. But Discovery Channel decided to do something funny with it. They didn't air it as it originally did. They cut it up into like a compilation. So like a bunch of out of context things mashed together, shortened them up, and then they just kind of mushed them. And like each episode would be a compilation from across all of the series. So you'd see varying production values.
No.
Like it'd be like, wow, why is it 5 years different in this one? It was bizarre. They didn't advertise it and it didn't do well. So that's probably why I don't remember it being on Discovery at all, but
I don't either.
That's weird. I mean, they could do with all the cheap, because by
Right.
then there's a lot of great cheap car challenges, because you had the $1,500 Porsches.
right. They
You
had so
had
many things.
there's the ones with the Italian cars where like the
The
Marat-
10,000, the Maroc, the Arauco, and then they did like, the Ferrari 308, the Dino 304
all,
GT.
all
whatever it
cars
is.
that are extremely valuable now.
Yes.
Maybe the Arauco, but
they've gone
still-
up.
they've
The
gone
Arauco.
up quite a bit. But yeah, they were able to buy for $10,000 back then, and like the Maroc, the engine just explodes spectacularly on a car that's now worth over six figures,
Yes.
multiple six figures probably, but back then was only $10,000. You
Yep.
cringe a little bit, like Clarkson destroying a Porsche. I don't think that was for Top Gear. That was just for one of his specials where he's ramming it into a house and crashing it into a wall and stuff. An air-cooled 911.
It's wild.
The specials and their original Botswana one, where they strip the cars apart to make them light, to get them across this weird desert that has sort of a primordial ooze to it, to where the cars are light enough, like a dune buggy. They kept getting better and better each time. It was just so.
Yeah.
And that's where Oliver came from.
That's
of course.
actually the second official special, but yes, that's it. I have a whole thing on the specials. We were just going to run down.
Oh,
real
okay,
quick.
yeah.
But yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's part of it. It's part of the deal.
Yeah.
So I'll speed along this part. So this is Series 8. Cinematography is getting better. One of the things they've always been known for. If you're listening to this on audio, hard to tell, but just imagine, no one has shot cars the way that Top Gear did, with the interesting, when they would do a segment on, like, Clarkson would review a car, they would show it, like water on it, and show it, like they would light paint and do all these crazy things that had never been done before, and people are still desperately trying to replicate.
There was one season where they got a hold of the Tron soundtrack
Yes,
from the new
that was
Tron
so good.
movie, and they were using that and the beauties of the cars and things. And obviously, somebody was just losing their mind with Daft Punk stuff, and it was so incredible. I just remember being so blown away by the cinematography of it and the way
didn't
they
see
put it
that one.
together.
Well, to go
There
back
was a
and
whole
look.
season they used it.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
an entire season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, off and on, but yeah, it was just fantastic because that Tron soundtrack is great. So this is they kind of got into a little bit more of a project car era there for a little bit, but they still had some notably good stuff. They made a van into a convertible. It was a van we never got here, so it was like, I forgot, Pessima or something.
Like the
I don't know.
Jaguar into a train.
The sports train. They
That was amazing,
They made a
actually,
cottage out of a lady's like Mercedes S class.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes, the big triple decker campers.
Yes. Cool.
And there's just so
There's,
many.
like I said, there's so
the
many
electric
things.
car that
The
they
ele-
made for themselves.
Yes. Yeah, there's the sports
look at
train, which
that.
is so funny because the car has this huge.
Look at the
spoiler.
wing.
And
What
they
year
made-
was this?
Yeah, they made so they had the whole thing was Hammond and Bay made a real train that was kind of just caravans being pulled together, but they made them like train cars, and they made it kind of nice. And the whole thing was they had journalists from various automotive or locomotive journalists, which I don't know how many of those there can be. But anyway, that was the joke for the thing, is they were subjecting to that, and Clarkson just put his two like no windshield out on the thing, just being like battered by the wind. But it's such great footage because Clarkson would just floor it all the time, and the little train wheels just like sliding, sparking on the rails. Yes, they're making their own motorhome.
Oh wow,
things so good. There's some like really great stuff. They obviously put it in the show, making it sound like we worked overnight, and then these obviously they had great production assistants, I guess you could say,
build craftsmen. Yes,
yeah. It was around this time. Oh yes, this was one of their famous things that they love to do, even on Car Trek, which is another reason I have words today. Is good play on words that happened, because what they did is they did this, and inevitably the flag fails and the INS drops off of muffins. And it's famous. They go, that's just classic.
Classic them. Yeah.
Classic
Look at them.
That's the BMW.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And so I forgot what it says penis on one side. I forgot what the actual full thing is, but when you open the door.
And that was my play on words with Olmeyer's cocktails on the SSR.
Yep.
Right.
That was great.
Or HHRSS, sorry. HHRSS was a panel, and so you're supposed to put your business on the panel. And so I did Olmeyer's cocktails. When you open the door, it said "Oh cock," which is James May's signature phrase.
It is.
And so that was my little tribute to them.
So it was around this time they also did the first amphibious car challenge during this time, which was another thing they used in their intro for years.
It was such a disaster.
Yeah.
That all of them sank. Did you watch it?
Absolutely. Another one that just got me so hooked.
All of them sank.
All of them sank. Mays almost made it out, but like inhaled water on the ramp, like on the way out. Fantastic failure. Great watch. And this was right now they went into another series 9. Obviously the show's a hit. We think we've covered that, but they really are an established hit now. It is interesting. I didn't know this either, purely because we don't get like a lot of British tabloids over here. But apparently, going into Series 9, there was a huge rumor that Jeremy Clarkson was just dead, and they played a bit on it on the show later on, which I never understood because apparently there's a big story there that somebody just kind of goes, "I think Jeremy Clarkson is dead on this like cattle farm somewhere," and I don't know what substantiated it. I don't know what anything it was. It just started to be. It was around that era. I mean, it's 09 or ish when people just go, okay, and just start running stories because you needed to be first because this is the internet era now. Jalopnik ran it, like Jeremy Clarkson's. I mean, it was like just an interesting thing. Eventually, obviously, he was like, "No, I'm not," and like issued a public statement. But they did make a funny like in memoriam type of thing where it was like 2005, 2009. And they showed him like lying out in a field.
Well, it happens all the time now. I think William Shatner every 3 months has to tell people he's not dead.
Yes. So this is the era we're talking about now. Jake's got it. They started using fantastically edited, wild explosion action movie type posters to advertise the thing. And this is also when, remember, it's as big as it can be. Going into Series 9, this is where Hammond has his big accident. He was racing a jet car. So they film a lot, obviously, before this stuff happens. And this was like the third time he did it. The video is like crazy. Apparently, he's going upwards of 280 miles an hour. Like the front right wheel blows out. Sends the car, violently to the right. It goes into the dirt, scoops up it, and the first thing that pretty much hits is the driver's compartment, like where it is. I mean, he has a roll bar there, but at like 288,
it digs into the ground.
Yeah,
the roll bar
digs into the ground and just like it's so violent. So I mean, and I started to learn a little bit more about the car. I didn't realize there were a couple of versions of this. This guy that made the rocket car, he had made the original version and died. He made the guy who made a sister car version to this. Also died racing it. And then Hammond almost died with this one.
So they all crashed?
Yes. So it was like, they were like, stop this cursed car.
Ocean Gate.
Yeah. It had a sticker on the inside of it that said, never drive faster than your angels can fly. And it's like, it was like sitting like right there on there. That was a brief
what would have
tidbit.
gotten him to get in that knowing that the other two people.
I don't think it was like widely known.
Well, I mean, I'd be doing research on a 290 mile an hour car.
Well, that's the thing is some of the stuff, they have producers and all these safety guys around that kind of ensure, to a degree, at a certain point, you're like, well, 10 people have told me it's safe. I'm going to get in it.
I mean, that's kind of like the Titan.
Yeah, well, the tire exploded.
And you can't, what are you going to do? So this had a massive outpouring. People were like, "Oh my gosh!" So because we knew about it here, but it was a big deal there in England. In solidarity, they didn't know if Hammond was going to survive and all stuff. So BBC didn't even do reruns of Top Gear during this time. They pulled everything off the air because they weren't sure if Top Gear was going to end in like, a tragedy. Luckily, we know that he did recover.
Yeah, well, after being in a coma and all the brain
And he had
recovery
serious
stuff.
brain
injury. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that was interesting about that is he was actually told to take like years off from doing things. But because of the crash and all of the things like that, and the show was already being as popular as it was now more popular than ever. And it was one of those strike while the iron's hot type of situations. And, God bless him for doing it. Because there's a lot of people who would have like, no, thank you. I'm never doing anything crazy again. But this is where we kind of, obviously Hammond was just doing mostly studio stuff at that time, should be noted. He didn't really do a lot of, other than the pre-film stuff, kind of mostly in studio. So that was why he was able to do it. He didn't just jump right back out there and start drifting around. This was around the time, this is the first time they did a USA special. I don't really want to call it that, but it's so good. I love this episode so much because this was around again in 2008. This is when it was like, whatever. The point is they've got the Camaro, the Ram, and the Lincoln. And this is kind of the first time that the show is definitely like in another land and not scripted. They're like just
right. It was a Cadillac Fleetwood.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Yes, and this is what he wrote. Yeah, the Hillary.
So basically, they tried to write things on people's cars to offend the locals, and they're in the Deep South, and it is not fake. Like the one is like vote for Hillary. The other one's like love rules, all this stuff. And people get visibly upset with them with what's written on their cars, and they are genuinely scared. But also, what I love about this segment is them going around in I think South Florida, maybe Miami, somewhere around there, maybe Orlando. Used car dealerships to try and buy $1,000 cars.
Yes. I believe that's where they started, right?
Right, and just seeing because like the Florida car dealer it's like the scummiest, and they went to the crappiest lots and got to film there, and just captured a moment in time it's so amazing.
And you were in car sales at that time. By this time.
So
it was definitely ringing home for you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was it's a classic segment. Still holds up to this day. But I mean, I remember at the time you're like, oh my gosh, writing Hillary something on a car in that area.
Oh yeah, didn't they?
They got shot at.
Cow on the roof of this, or was that a different one?
Yeah, they put a cow on it,
a dead cow,
and he rolls in it.
Yep. I do remember that.
Like I said, I do believe they actually do get shot at.
Yeah, I remember the gas station.
Because the gas station comes up like a gang of dudes in a truck. It's like, it's not scripted. It's like they were in genuine danger.
Yeah. Right. And that was the one where he was the only one with working air conditioning, and they
disconnect.
And he brings dinner. It's all just a whole cow that rolls off the car.
And Clarkson's got so many good jokes about murderers driving Camaros, and it's so good.
There's another episode that I remember, like, you could pretty much remember every part of it.
Yeah, the braking test and the dodgings up in the bayou. Yeah, it's all just
such classic
burned
stuff.
in. Yep.
So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. What they also started doing, they did one before this, but is what they started to become known for was not only a great weekly program with incredibly high production values, great interaction between the hosts and everything like that. But every once in a while, they would do a special where they didn't do any of the normal car reviews. It was like, today we're doing this grand adventure. You could kind of put it like that. The first one they ever did was the Polar Special in 2007. And that, they had this incredibly mild, but they already made the Hilux famous, but they got one of those crazily modified Arctic Hiluxes with like the absolutely wild tires. It's like crazy.
Wow.
Like I said, watch it. I don't want to talk about the whole thing, but it's basically a healthily modified Arctic truck. And they race to a certain destination. It's Clarkson and May in the Hilux, and they make Hammond go on a team of a dog sled.
Oh, lovely.
He has to lead a team of dogs.
Well, what I remember, the iconic moment is they had the porta potty on the back and the trailer hitch. So if they needed to poop, they'd have to poop with the trailer hitch. And then he's on the toilet and he starts driving off. And then also they got in trouble because they're technically on the ocean because it's frozen ice.
Yeah, and
they started drinking gin, I think, while they were driving the cars up to the North Pole. And that got them in trouble.
I don't know why, because I think they made a good point. They're like, we're not on a road and there's nothing. It's like maritime law.
So would you like some gin? And and that got them in a bit of trouble.
Right. So that was one of the main things, one of the most iconic specials, blah, blah, blah. believe it or not, and this surprised me, this was the first Top Gear anything shot in HD. So they actually went all out. This was back when it was really expensive to shoot in HD. So it was like, they could only do that for something like this. Like, we'll shoot the special in HD. Everything else is going to be in standard definition. Also, later that year, they kind of do the series in segments. This is the Botswana special also, same year, 2007. And that's where they had Oliver and all that stuff. And it was a great special because, like you said, as they were going on, they had to keep modifying their cars because as driving through this bog, the cars were too heavy, so they needed to shed weight. And it's just interesting to see what the cars start out like and what they end up like.
Except for
Oliver, because Hammond had grown so attached to it that he just didn't want to hurt it. And it, like, you really do feel the relationship there. Like, it kind of starts out as like a little bit, and by the end of it, you as a viewer love Oliver.
Yep.
And he still has the car to this day.
Yes,
it got flooded all the way up to the roof, and they were able to get it running again because it's so simple.
Yes.
And yeah, still around.
And you probably loved it for the Mercedes W123.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Because that was right in your era there.
Yes.
Next one that they did that we could talk about is probably tough to say if it's my favorite, but it has the most moments in my mind, is the Vietnam special. So this is the one where they go, they each have mopeds and they go across Vietnam. Now, I'm not looking at you on purpose, Tyler. I just am saying they had a lot of great moments there. I literally didn't even think about that.
No.
But it's just hilarious because Clarkson has been in the past, he's been so outspoken about not liking motorcycles, blah, 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 blah. Hammond loves motorcycles. They do a lot of funny stuff. It's fantastic. The only one of us here has actually been to Vietnam, so I don't know if
And it's
you have
not
anything
me.
to say.
I've been there a couple times.
Yeah.
Nice place, I hear.
But they give each other funny gifts. It's a great special. I love it.
Yeah, it is really. They all go to the tailor, and
Yes.
and I've gone to the tailor in Hoi An and get these fancy suits done. And then then of course when Clarkson wrecks his bike, he ruins his suit, and he's so mad about it. But it is a very. You see them out of their element. They're not in cars. They're trying to traverse a long distance, and the infrastructure is not there for them to do this. And I've driven most of it, and yeah, even 10 years after that, it was still pretty rough to get to places. And you're giving each other massive gifts. It is a very, very funny special, which you didn't expect because at first, like, oh no, there's no cars. Like, come on.
Exactly. That's why I went into it. I was like, what are they going to do here? But it turns out, like I said, their chemistry is so good that it just works. And it's like I said, and they make them boats at the end of it. It's just it's fantastic.
They can make anything watchable.
I did my 2 tours in AM. I'm still alive.
Oh boy! Why would you bring yourself back that? We've given you 2 outs now, and you just dive right back in. It's like,
you weren't there, man. You don't know.
We don't know.
Great. Sorry, military.
After that, we've got the Bolivia special. And I just recently rewatched this one.
That's where it looked genuinely like Clarkson was going to get killed for rear-ending May so many times.
Relentless.
Where he comes with the machete and say, like, if you don't stop rear-ending, I'm going to kill you. And it seems real. It is so convincing. And what an epic trek with them as well, as far as, just being able to get through the jungle.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the machete. Yeah,
look at that.
Iconic moment for sure. That might be my favorite.
Yeah, it's great. Like I said, I just recently rewatched it, so I was like, oh yeah.
That or when they went to Iraq.
Yes, that was a great one as well. Yeah, see, that's the joke I was going to say, is him and can't remember if he can't take his malaria pill, and he's like, if I were a girl, I'd be pregnant a lot.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was a great comment. Like I said, that's what, and these are comments that he's just making to himself in the car. He knows the cameras are rolling, but it's great stuff. They can't make TV like this anymore, folks.
No, you can't make it.
So yes, teed me up great there. The next one was the Middle East special, 2010. And this was still when people are like, ugh, I don't know if going to the Middle East is such a good idea. There was some stuff going on. If you guys
went to Iraq in a Z3 and a Miata.
Yeah.
And they dropped them off on the plane. Yeah.
And the head gasket failed spectacularly on the Z3, and they had to fix it on the side. It was
wild.
Unbelievable. The Miata blowing out its spark plug. It was so insane that they were in this setting with total hoopties.
Yep.
It's epic.
It is great. And like I said, especially with the politically charged time, it was very like, I can't believe they're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
which it was bad at the time, but now they'd get kidnapped and
They really
beheaded.
would
Oh, yeah,
it would be
real
worse
bad.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be even worse now. But yeah, it's still just wild. After that, they did the India special, which was where they had the lorries. No, that's not the lorry one. That's a different one. This is the Jaguar XJ6 and the Mini, and the Rolls Royce Silver
Like they're
Shadow.
trying to reestablish
Yes.
relations with India because they were an imperialist country that had sort of controlled India for a long time, and they were trying to, I think, do better.
They were improving relations.
Yes.
Essentially what they're doing. They modified their cars very hilariously. James May's cars got all the, the elephant and all the doilies. I don't know. But there's names for them, but it's another goodie. He's got one of Jake's favorite cars in there, the Jag. He loves it. There's a better picture of the cars.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Look at that Mini.
Jake loves Jags.
Yes. After that, we're getting to really modern stuff here. They had the Africa special, and that's the one with they all had wagons. So they had
Yes.
the BMW 528 Touring, the Impreza WRX, which turned out to be like the good choice because it had all-wheel drive, and then the Volvo 850R.
Terrible choice.
Yeah, terrible choice. And it's the whole special is them being stuck, I feel like.
Right.
It's like
I remember this dragging on for the same thing.
it really
would be
is it's like, oh my gosh, they're stuck again. I mean, obviously they make it entertaining.
Well, my favorite moments with that one are Clarkson making a whole spa, like fancy hotel room in this back window. But then there's something wrong with this car where he uses the log to hill start assist
Yes.
as far as his clutch or whatever's going on, smashes his back window. And then they steal the hood off of, I think, the hood scoop off because somebody's overheating.
Yeah.
And just cut a jagged hole into the hood, I think, of the Subaru.
So good.
It just annihilating each other's car. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
there it
Making,
is. Look
making
at
it
that.
the toilet
Oh yeah,
seat.
they made the toilet seat the scoop for the Subaru. Yes.
Yes.
And they made the Subaru scoop the scoop for the 850. That's so
What
good.
a thing.
But yeah, great, obviously great. After that, that's what I was thinking is the Burma special, and this is where they get what the British call lorries.
Yes.
And so I mean, the kind of things that they are don't matter. They're a bunch of Isuzus.
And Clarkson got in trouble for that one because he talks about truck drivers being murderers all the time. He just kept making that joke over and
Oh,
over.
But
Right.
he made
Hammered
his
into the ground.
his funny like a sports truck, like cut the roof off of it, and it's great. It genuinely looks like they do some tough driving on very narrow roads. And like I said, these guys don't. It's not like they can't drive, but these are huge vehicles in a very narrow area. It's another goodie. But as we're going on here, this is where things start to get even more heated. And I remember this one very well, the Patagonia special, where they have they're in Argentina and they have the Mustang, the 928, and then May has the Lotus Esprit V8.
Right. Yeah. So they've
Yeah.
had some controversies before this, and they're in the tabloids because of things that he said. I think there's one where didn't he say like there was a bridge and it had a bit of a slope to it, which was like
He
a
made
negative
Asian,
connotation.
it was just an Asian
Yes.
kind of thing
Was
because
that-
there was an Asian man walking across the bridge, and that's
Right.
why he made the joke and he got in trouble for that one.
And that was a big deal. But then nothing beat this as far as the worldwide headlines that they got
Right.
because of a number plate of all things.
Yes, and I couldn't still find out why it's insulting, but
The Falklands War,
yes, the Falklands
1982.
War.
Yes.
But it's like I didn't know what about the plate was that insulting.
Because it just brings up the
Yeah.
fact that
That it happened?
Margaret Thatcher just
Yeah.
decided to
Yeah, it was because that's the plate. It's H982 FKL, and
Yeah.
it's like I don't know. It's so anyway. I don't know if I still couldn't find if it was definitely intentional or whatever, but it got actual people, like it basically caused people to have a real safety issue, a
riot.
Oh,
a
yes.
genuine riot over this plate. The guys were in danger. People were throwing rocks as they would drive by. I mean, it was like I remember. They showed some of the because they kind of shot it guerrilla style in certain parts.
Well, didn't they have to leave?
Because they had to, yeah. They were basically like the country was like, get out of here. And the guerrilla style footage from that is where you can like really sense their fear. I mean, they even you can hear the radio calls. They're saying like, get the star cars out of here. There's other people driving the star cars away, trying to get them out. I mean, like it was a genuine safety concern for everybody. And all the people knew to look for were these three cars. And honestly, before that part, it's pretty impressive what they're putting the cars through.
Right.
Oh, sure.
The Lotus Esprit V8,
Yeah.
which everybody assumed was a piece of junk and wouldn't be reliable, turned out to be amazing.
Yes.
Shocked.
And until they all got
And
basically
Clarkson has
destroyed.
one of his best, he tells the story about how the 928 why the 928 is so important to him. And I remember that be like getting me in my heartstrings because he talks about how it's, it's one of the reasons he got to see, say goodbye to his dad was the 928. And it was like, oh my God, the special has everything. And of course, by this point, it's 2014. They've got all the money in the world, all the production value you could ever ask for. And well, that leads us to the main event. So
The incident.
yeah, they called it the fracas.
Well, because there's a lot of
There's a lot of other
there's
stuff.
a lot of buildup, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we'll never know as far as the because obviously the show's the biggest show in the world. They've done 60 Minutes at this point, and they are so big, and there's so much pressure.
Yes.
And there's a lot of tension. I feel like with everybody, especially Clarkson.
Clarkson, yes. So everything I understood, this is also around the time he had just recently lost his mother. And because of the show's popularity and because they're doing Top Gear Live, they're doing Top Gear, there's other stuff going on. He even felt like, there's little time where he wasn't in front of a camera or behind the wheel. Because for all these specials, they really are taking and not an insignificant amount of time, and they really are driving these distances and stuff like that. I mean, they're putting in the work. As you know, you've shot car treks back to back. It's like, it's not a vacation by any means. And if you've got other stuff that's going on and you don't have a lot of time, tensions were high. So on March 4th, 2015, they had just wrapped filming. It wasn't a special.
I can't believe it's been 10 years since this happened. Holy
Isn't it crazy?
smokes.
Yes, there it is. So it's a place called the Simon Stone Hall Hotel in North Yorkshire, which is the most British sentence I've ever said.
The rest is legend.
Yes.
Just true.
So basically, after a day of filming, Clarkson is tired, irritable, and he comes back to the hotel late because, they just got done filming. There's obviously some crew at the hotel that had been there already. The hotel has now stopped serving food. And I believe it was, unfortunately, this man named, it's Oisin, O-I-S-N, Timon.
Yeah, somebody who got a lot of death threats for basically killing Top Gear.
So what happened was, I think he was the unfortunate guy who chimed in and piped up and said, they're not serving food anymore. And I know how this goes. If sometimes when the rage boils over, it's not the recipient's fault. It literally was. Clarkson was at the very end of his rope, and that was just the poor guy who said the one thing.
Yep.
Well, I heard that this producer was being a jerk beforehand.
I have no doubt.
And being just
I have no doubt there's
annoying.
I have no doubt there was some history leading up to it.
Yes.
But as far as the actual incident happened, it was pretty quick from everything that I've understood of they're not serving food anymore, basically. And it just being like, so what I thought it was, I had always interpreted from the news is that he walked over and like popped him in the mouth. Apparently he just verbally lit into him like unrelentingly. And Jeremy Clarkson's a very smart, clever, and probably hurtful man when he's angry. And everybody is, if you've ever been in the room when somebody's absolutely exploding, if you're just in there, you're just going. And you're kind of just stuck.
I'm having flashbacks
Yeah,
now.
I was like, if somebody's exploding, you're just kind of watch.
Got a few. Yeah. I'm going to bring that up.
So, yeah, he launched into an unprovoked verbal attack, which, of course, everybody watched. And I don't know if he tried to calm him down or whatever, but it ended up into a pop in the mouth. Clarkson admits to it. Timon does go get seen. He gets reported. He does have a busted lip. This was not like a full down knuckle drag ass beating. It was the culmination of a verbal letting have it.
Yes. Well, and at this point, Top Gear has been in the news for all the wrong reasons lately because it's the biggest show in the world, and they keep doing things like the slope, kind of the racial slur, and the Falklands thing is fresh in mind. And there's other things that Clarkson's said and done that have frustrated the BBC. And he's I think he's even been a little bit critical of some things at the BBC and how they're doing things.
Oh, yeah,
so it's not like he's. This is a one-time infraction, and they just cold turkey decided to can him. A stunning decision to kill your biggest show in the world.
It was
To fire someone over a sandwich.
Yes, and so what ended up happening is this was all reported to the BBC. Clarkson, admitted to it. There's no denial. It was very straight up. Nobody had to get his story straight. It was, I was at the end of my rope. I let this guy have it. We got into it. I'm sorry. He repeatedly attempted to apologize. The BBC, of course, launches an investigation. You know how big companies do things. But the quote from Tony Hall, the BBC director, was, "It is with great regret that I have told Jeremy Clarkson today that the BBC will not be renewing his contract. The famous thing is there cannot be one rule for one and one rule for another dictated by how popular a person is."
Yes, there can be.
Yes, and there definitely can be.
Yes.
If somebody is single-handedly carrying your network,
Right.
they are entitled to a little bit or a lot bit more rope.
And some guy's drunk in a hotel bar, and there's a little pop in the face, and your whole career's over. I mean, it's not. It wasn't like he tried to kill him.
Yeah, I would think if they went to Timon and said, "Hey, do you want to, because he's obviously on the show, he's being paid." You'd think they'd go to him and be like, "Hey, can we get past this?"
Right.
He must not have, because.
Well, see, that's the thing. I think Timon wasn't that upset over it. I think the BBC, it was the press, and they were so. From what I understand, very so short-sighted with it, and these bad things that happened in such succession. It was like you are becoming increasing problem, and it's not like the show was getting more popular. Its peak, it couldn't get.
It's 100 million people watching the show.
It could not get more popular, and so I think they're just kind of seeing it as you're becoming an increasing liability here. We keep getting bad press. Because it wasn't just this. Like I said, he's in the press for other things all the time.
Well, and at this point, I think also the world was getting more sensitive to these things.
That. Oh, you can't get away with that. It's not cool. I mean, this is pretty much the start of even the Me Too era and all this. Everybody's getting busted for something.
Yes.
Around this time, there was a lot of old school Hollywood ways, that of people being able to get away with things that it was right in that time, 2015.
Yeah, the back in my day, that would fly. It was not flying now.
Right.
And so the public, there was a mixed reaction. Obviously, he's not universally loved in Britain because of these various things he said about various different groups. He isn't just targeted one group. No. He isn't managed to insult everybody at some point. But most people kind of get that that's his thing. But still, nevertheless, you can't win everybody's heart.
The people that aren't fans that don't watch the show get very offended by the things that are said out of context. And the people that watch the show and know Clarkson know that he's just being funny.
Exactly.
And that was the problem. The people that weren't in on the joke just didn't understand. But Clarkson was definitely, what superhero movie it was where you
There's it now.
You die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
Exactly.
And it was getting to that point for him. He was the guy at the top of the hill, the biggest show in the world, and he was a stone for someone to knock down.
Well, and I'd heard he didn't really put up much of a fight either. He was kind of like, you want me to walk, I'll walk. He's a prideful man. I don't know that he was begging for his job at that point.
Look at the first iteration of Top Gear. He knew. He was like, I'll walk away. He knew exactly what was going to happen. That show doesn't work without him. Of course, like I said, public reaction was mixed. They did have a petition that got over 1 million signatures to bring it back. There were protests. I mean, it was a big deal, even around here. Because I remember seeing the headline, I was like, "What?" And then the interesting thing is, they still had a bunch of stuff that they shot, but they couldn't. He's not on the show anymore, so they had this awkward episode where it's just Clarkson and Hammond, not Clarkson, Hammond, May and Hammond, talking about kind of a brief intro to the thing. And the best part is they have the giant elephant physically in the room with them,
which was really great that they did that.
Because they knew and what ended up happening, if you don't know the history, is they also said, well, we won't do the show without him.
Right. They could have replaced Clarkson and still had Hammond and May, but they chose to be a unified front.
Yes, there's the elephant in the room.
Yep.
Yep, they became a unified front, leaving with also Andy Willman and other members of the staff. But those are the big three that left with them. And, honestly, the part that happens after that, we all know. They went on to do the grand tour for Amazon. It was great. You went to the premiere of that.
Yes, so that's where I met all three of them. Clarkson, Hammond, and May. Had my keys autographed for the fast key with Clarkson on my CLK 55 and the slow key with James May. And long talk with Clarkson. Long talk with the hamster about winching up the dam with the Defender for the anniversary of the Defender. And me being able to write an article about going to the opening of the Grand Tour, got my foot in the door writing for blogs, which led to me making videos for blogs for Auto Trader and all that stuff, and completely launched my YouTube career. So without Clarkson punching the guy in the face and starting a new show and me going out to that premiere, I wouldn't have had this career at all. And Clarkson, to his credit, replied to my tweet as well. At the end of it, after talking to him, I said it was an amazing thing. I can't wait for everybody to see what you guys shot. And he replied,
didn't
so
that
nice,
blow you up?
So nice to meet you. It blew me up.
Yeah.
Him replying to that tweet launched my career from the Grand Tour. And I don't think Hoovie's Garage would have happened if he did not do that. I really don't think so. So I do owe Clarkson pretty much everything for all this.
Absolutely.
I mean, Clarkson and then Doug DeMuro for hiring me at Auto Trader. So it's a pretty crazy, just being at the right place, right time, the circumstances. Because I already made one attempt at YouTube that had completely failed, and then of course my car dealership failed. So I thought, well, I'm done. I'm just gonna work in the stores, the Freddy's Frozen Custom Steak Burgers, open those up and have some fun cars. But the thought of being U.S. Top Gear, which was what I originally thought. Like, I want to do U.S. Top Gear before Rutledge and Tanner and Adam Ferrara had their show. I thought that'd be great. I want to be that guy, and I'd given up on it up until that moment. So,
But now you've had the chance to do
Kart Trek,
Yeah,
yes.
which is amazing. And now, do you remember, like, I know that's obviously like such a transformative moment for you. Do you remember where you were when you first read that tweet and what your reaction was?
it was the day of the shoot, so they made us take our phones and leave them behind. So there were no phones at this event. That was the last time I was at a live event with thousands of people where nobody had their phones. That was the other crazy part of it. They had a live band. It was called Burning Van. So they had a caravan burning from a crane, a camper, and nobody had their phones. Everybody was in the moment. So nobody's like, "Hey, can I have your picture?" So your only way to have a memory was like to genuinely interact with these people. And it was so different. There was no, people didn't think to bring paper for autographs and stuff like that. So there wasn't much of that going on, even though I did get my keys autographed. It was just that it was like being transported back in time another 10 or 15 years, and something I've just never experienced again. But when I got back to the car, I sent the tweet and he replied almost immediately. Wow. And then I was getting media inquiries like, who are you? Were you there? What happened? And that's how I was finally able to get my foot in the door to start writing at blogs, because I had no experience. It wasn't published anywhere before. So that was it for me. But the Grand Tour, I think, was a great switch as far as them having the budget, what they were able to do with it, and everything became sort of a special. And Top Gear,
Oh gosh.
I think when it came to the U.S., when it came to like American viewers, they didn't watch the new version because there was Chris Harris?
Chris Evans.
Chris Evans?
Chris Evans at first, and he was not he's a radio host there, but he's not very like, his voice is kind of harsh, and squeaky, and whatever. And it's Chris Harris and Matt LeBlanc at first only.
Yeah.
And then they had Sabine.
No, they had a huge group of people where they kind of just throwing a bunch of people at the wall to see what stuck.
Yeah. And it was like one season of him, and then they got Harris. They started switching people. Yeah. Then it was see, it was almost like original Top Gear where they just had a bunch of guys. Yeah. And they tried to keep the segment or the format exactly the same. We'll have studio, it goes like this, and we'll do a thing. But it just didn't work.
And of course, they used the accident with Freddie Flintoff as eventually, Harris, right? Or
Harris is the whatever.
And Freddie Flintoff, and I'm forgetting the third guy because I really didn't watch it. I mean, I tuned it a little bit, but I didn't like the kind of jock bro aspect of the two hosts, because I wasn't really a sports guy and a jock, and these guys, one was a cricketer and the other one was that, and it was just kind of like, it felt like I was watching like fraternity guys towel whipping each other,
right?
And less about the cars. So it didn't, the humor didn't catch me quite as much. But of course, he flipped the car and seriously, I should have died and damaged the face, and they used that as an excuse to completely kill Top Gear entirely, which I think they were kind of looking for a reason, to be honest.
Now,
but
like I said, I didn't want to make the whole thing 3 hours long, like the Corvette episode. But I mean, we didn't even talk about Top Gear USA or anything. We could, that's the same kind of deal. That was kind of awkward at first, and that hit its stride, and they canceled that. It's just like they, for some reason, even with the name, which Top Gear carries a lot of weight in the industry, I think it still does, it just doesn't work without the original three.
Right.
Now, this did, like I said, the Top Gear USA, I did come to enjoy.
Yes.
It had a kind of a rougher start, and now you're in with all of them other than Tanner.
Yeah, I've worked with both of them at Barrett Jackson now, as far as Adam and Tanner, or not Adam and Rutledge, and since then there's been YouTube videos, and like Freddie's worked with with Richard Hammond now on some Drive Tribe stuff, and like I've had my car roasted by James May at one point. You know,
So wild.
That was great,
It's
watching
so
that.
it's so surreal, but. It's these guys, this original trio, and Andy Willman, which I met Willman on the set. I recognized him and went up and talked to him for a long time about the fracas and the transition and all that stuff. And he was wearing a very interesting watch that I don't remember what it was, but then he took it off and handed it to me. And so I suppose he could have just ran off with it, but it was so cool to see all that. But obviously, so influential. It is so what we see on YouTube now is what these guys invented.
Yes.
And nobody has come up with a different format that's entirely different at all as far as the way, car entertainment is. And I don't know if anybody will be creative enough to do it. And that's the thing where they just announced the new hosts of the Grand Tour to replace the trio that have sort of...
Yes, you just did a April's Garage video on this. I didn't get to watch it yet, but I saw that you did.
The Throttle House guys.
Okay.
And
Which is
then,
great.
Yeah.
And then the a guy that's a big TikToker that goes crazy about trains. Like he just goes insane about trains.
Loves
Is he
trains.
Is he autistic? That's,
Well, I mean, it looks like it looks like in the videos, but no, he's possibly because he's an engineer
And he likes trains.
Works for
Well,
Rolls-Royce
let's not
briefly.
label him autistic yet.
But
Yes,
that's the video because he does it from a weird vantage point. So they picked the guys that were most emulating Top Gear and doing it on YouTube, and the subscriber base is huge, and the quality of the content's really great. They have bits, they have humor, all that stuff. So good choice there, and we'll see. But tough act to follow.
It's tough. And I think what you guys do with Car Trek is you don't try to be Top Gear. You even say,
we try to be Top Gear.
You even say it's a love letter to Top Gear.
Yes.
But the thing is, you guys also know each other in real life. It's a pretty good on-screen relationship there. But I think what we're talking about here is we had a once-in-a-generation TV show.
Yes.
It lived a bright life, a great life, and I know they have an entire TV channel on Samsung TV now that just will play nonstop Top Gear. There's so much, now we'd call it content, out there to watch. There's hours and hours and hours and hours of Top Gear. If you tried to watch it all, I should have looked that up. If you tried to watch it all, how long it would have taken. Somebody tell me in the comments, but it would take a while.
Hundreds of hours.
Yes, sure.
It is quite a legacy. It's cool to see that they're doing their own projects now. As far as Clarkson's Farm is a mega hit. Who would have thought he could reinvent himself as a farmer and an advocate for farmers. And James May, his travel show. Richard Hammond has his Smallest Cog as far as his car show, and then is keeping Drive Tribe going as far as with the YouTube videos
He's
that
got
have been
his
pretty
daughter
epic
involved now.
recently as far as the YouTube content coming from there. So the hosts live on. They still have their careers, and hopefully they get the band back together for something someday. I hope so.
I do
It'd be
too.
great if they're 80 years old and they get together to do it.
And I think they could.
Yeah,
They still could.
absolutely.
Yeah, they're just transcendental. I mean, they're just...
Because they are.
it's
If you look at them
unbelievable.
now, like Jake was showing, they're older now, but they get together and it's like they were never apart. It's possibly TV's or really industry's greatest trio.
Yes.
Very formative in my life, and it helped enhance an already massive car enthusiasm. And I'm glad I got to kind of talk about
Well,
it today.
boys, it's time to go warm up the Jag and head home, right?
Yes.
But,
I think so.
Great job, Elliot.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And,
wonderful.
If you all like what you saw, be sure to like, subscribe, all that stuff. We'll be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. And we do have the Patreon if you'd like to join and support that, make suggestions. As far as the name, that's the thing. It's up in the air. I
Yeah,
don't
hey,
know.
by the way, you throw some dollars behind a name suggestion, and I'm going to
there you
consider
go.
a little bit more.
You got Elliot in pants, so we're making progress on
thank
that
God
one.
for that.
Yes, and next week you don't want to miss it because Rob is going to dive into another institution,
A little different.
very
style.
different. The history of Grand Theft Auto, the video game, which I think all of us sort of grew up playing.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm very excited to learn about the history and how it all came to be and the evolution of it. And endless hours for me playing that game, before life happened, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, in a sense, Grand Theft Auto, I mean, as much controversy as Clarkson in some ways.
Oh, yes.
With how they were pushing buttons and envelopes and really testing how far they could go. And we're going to really dive into that next week you'll hear some pretty crazy stories of, what they tried to get away with, some things they snuck into the games, and
I can't imagine they were able to had to take anything out because it seems like if you're able to pick up hookers in a video game and bang them in your car and go to a strip club, what What did they have to take out?
There were a few things. There were a few
I
things.
can't wait. I can't
that
wait to
did
hear
get
about
pulled.
Okay, well, thank you so much for listening and watching.